Hello and welcome to another episode of the Heat Check podcast. I am John Devine. With me is Anthony Chang.
JD, hey everybody.
With the Heat out of the playoffs, it seems like there might not be as much to talk about, but we're here to dispel that myth. So one of the things, the NBA Finals are set. Tom Thibodeau from the Knicks has been kicked to the curb. And the Indiana Pacers is the East Coast of the Eastern Conference's representative in the NBA Finals for the first time since 2000, if I'm not mistaken. Man, it's a while.
Yeah.
But let's talk about it. But let's mostly talk about how it affects the Heat. So we'll start with the fact that, like we just said, Indiana's in the finals. The Knicks are out. I think after the Knicks beat Boston, people kind of automatically assumed that they would kind of take over. Didn't happen. Looking at Indiana, why is Indiana in this spot right now? Is it just lucky?
Yeah, it's interesting because before the season, I think a lot of people would say, "Oh, the Heat are in Indiana's class, kind of middle of the Eastern Conference, fighting for a 5 or 6 seed, especially when they had Jimmy." But Indiana has been one of the better teams in the NBA, one of the best teams I think in the NBA, behind only Oklahoma City, who they're playing in the finals since the start of the new year. Their record has been great. Their offense has been phenomenal. They have good depth, right? You see it off their bench with Matherin and TJ McConnell and our old friend Thomas Bryant, right? Providing quality minutes off the bench for the Pacers. And you have obviously Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam's been playing awesome, and Miles Turner. Like, they have a lot of good players, and their offense is arguably the best in the NBA. So that's why they are where they are right now. It is surprising. I don't think many people had Indiana representing the East in the NBA Finals. How does it affect the Heat? I think we could say the East is wide open, right? With an asterisk, because I don't know how that really relates to the Heat when they got historically annihilated by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like, they seem pretty far behind, even though the East is wide open. But something that we'll get to, JD, I'm sure, later in this episode. But maybe you feel like, you added Kevin Durant, you had another player of that caliber, you could prop yourself up to being a team that could contend for the East, as we saw with Indiana. You get Pascal Siakam, and all of a sudden they made the conference finals last year. They lost to Boston. They see the right back, and they win it, and they go to the NBA Finals. So could Kevin Durant or a player like that put the Heat, in the Indiana's class? We could argue that, but definitely I think it seems a little more wide open than we thought maybe a few months ago.
Okay, because, if you looked at the beginning of the season, we're talking about how the East stacks up, and you have Boston here, you have these teams.
Yeah.
And now, if we're looking at Indiana as a quote-unquote legit power, okay, so that's just another team that they fall behind the pecking order. I think you were talking about their offense. Well, is it offense or is it pace? Because their pace seems like
it's both.
New York.
Yeah, it's both. And usually you don't see pace win out in the playoffs, right? Because everything slows down and you have to play in the half court. Well, Indiana's found a way to run at everybody, and it's giving everybody problems. Their defense is fine. It's not great, but their defense is good enough. It was just their offense has been awesome, and their shooting has been really good. Tyrese Halliburton is like a machine out there. Is he going to score 30 every night? No, but he gets like 15 assists and 1 turnover. Just like he doesn't commit turnovers. He's just running their offense to perfection. So, it's going to be, I know a lot of people were saying, well, Oklahoma City, Indiana, not a sexy matchup for the NBA Finals. It's going to be a fun basketball matchup. You have Oklahoma City's very, very good defense against Indiana's very, very good offense. That's kind of the storyline of this series. It's going to be fun to see how they match up, who wins out, right? I think most people are picking OKC for good reason. But just that side of the court, Oklahoma City's defense against Indiana's offense, that's going to be fun to watch.
Okay, you say they're picking. So who are you picking?
I'm picking OKC. I just think they have the best player in the series in SGA, and they're the deeper team. As much as we talk about Indiana's depth, I mean, OKC's depth. OKC's two-way depth. They're guys who can defend, who could shoot, who could score. 8-9 deep is really, really impressive. They've been the best team in the NBA pretty much all season long. I'm going to go with them. I don't think Indiana's going to make it easy. I think there's going to be a lot of competitive games. But I'm going to pick OKC, and I want to say 5, but seeing 6.
Okay. So now I'm going to look at it just from a South Florida or a Heat fan perspective. What does it take for them to take over these guys, to overtake either one, to be in this spot next year?
It's going to be tough for the Heat to make that big of a jump in 1 year. It's going to, and even Pat Riley spoke about it in his end of the season press conference. It's probably going to be a multi-season thing, unless you get lucky and you get Giannis or something like that, and something breaks your way. But if it goes how we think it's going to go and how it looks like it's going to go, this is going to be a multi-year process. I know Heat fans don't want to say that. Well, but I will say this, and we go back to the Eastern Conference and what we've kind of learned about it this postseason. Boston's going to be without Tatum next season, right? Obviously, unfortunately for him, he tore his Achilles. Milwaukee's going to be without Dame because he also tore his Achilles for all the season, or at least most of the season for sure. Giannis, who knows where he's going to be next year. And Cleveland has a lot of things to figure out. They were, again, very, very good in the regular season. They looked really good against the Heat in the first round, but then they lose to the Pacers in the second round. So Cleveland has a lot of stuff to figure out. So, I mean, there isn't like a clear favorite, and I guess that is a positive for the Heat, where like there's not like that overwhelming, like we thought with the Celtics last offseason, where like, I don't know who anybody's going to beat Boston. They're going to win the East and run away with it. Well, it doesn't look that way, especially without Tatum next season. So East is a little wide open. You're going to have the Knicks obviously come back. You have the Pacers. Detroit is up and coming. We saw it in the playoffs. Orlando's up and coming. If they add another piece this offseason, they'll be even better. And you still have Cleveland, obviously, and Boston's going to be so good. They still have good players. We'll see what they do with their roster. But, yeah, there's not overwhelmingly like OKC in the West, right? There's not that right now in the East. And that's something that if you're the Heat, you're like, maybe if we do add a Kevin Durant or obviously a Giannis, like we could be a top 4 team, top 5 team in the East if we keep most of this core together. So I'm sure that's what they're thinking. We'll see what they can do to see if they can lift themselves up in the East hierarchy, but definitely not as top heavy, I think, as I thought and probably as you thought, JD, entering the playoffs, with the Eastern Conference, where we thought Boston and Cleveland were just head and shoulders above everybody.
It is funny because when you first mentioned the tier of possible contenders coming out the East, you did not mention New York.
Right.
And then you did kind of going through. I guess the question is, with Thibodeau gone, does anybody even know what we have? And I'm going to address something because it's kind of funny. There are people who are throwing out there, well, maybe they can get a first rounder for Spos, which is insane. I guess it's a full circle moment considering how Riley ended up here.
Right.
He has no ties there. I think it's just sexy to say it, but let's be honest.
Yeah, and I think Spos is so appreciative. I wrote this yesterday. He always says it, of how they've always stuck by him, and he's given them reason to stick with him. Right? He's been a very good coach, but there's been years, the Big Three era, right, JD, where like that first year wasn't great. They lose in the finals to a really, I think most people would admit, an inferior Dallas Mavericks team. Like the Heat should have won that series. Look at Tom Thibodeau. He made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks first time the Knicks have been there in 25 years, and he gets fired. A lot of coaches in Spos' position that year, 2011, when he lost in the finals with the Big Three, probably would have been fired. And Spos knows that, and he's always thanking Mickey Arison and Nick Arison and Pat Riley for kind of sticking by him. So I just, it's hard for me to just see him. Like, I want to leave. I just don't see it. Especially he just signed a contract extension, long-term contract extension. Seems pretty invested. With the Heat. I've seen that on Twitter, hopeful Knicks fans saying, oh, maybe we could do that and kind of get revenge for them getting Pat. I just don't see that happening.
Why do you think Tibbs was kicked to the curb?
I'm guessing here. I'm assuming they think they need maybe, I don't even want to say modern. That's the kind of a jab at Thibodeau. I don't know. Like, I think Tibbs did a good job. That team was pretty consistent all season long. Again, one of the better. Everyone thinks about Tibbs as a defensive coach. They were one of the better offenses in the league this year. So a lot of you could say, well, I need more creativity on offense because their offense wasn't good enough. They were one of the best offenses in the league. It's really their defense that wasn't that good this season. So I was surprised, like many other people, that he was fired. I'm guessing they just want a new voice, right? Or maybe they think he's playing guys too many minutes, which is his reputation, and they want guys to be fresher in the playoffs. I'm not sure. We'll probably get a better answer when we see what they do, right? Who they hire. Maybe they have somebody in mind. Maybe they saw Mike Malone out there and they're like, hey, if we can get Mike
It's from New
Malone.
York.
Yeah, I mean or I know Jay Wright's been mentioned. So maybe they just like somebody that kind of was available, and they're like, let's just make the change right now. So then we'll get more information of why, like the background of why this happened. Maybe by the hire they make to fill his position.
Well, I think Jay Wright's hilarious. As just for those of you who don't follow college basketball that much, Jay Wright was the coach of Villanova, and there are quite a few Villanova guys there.
Yeah,
so
right.
I can see Brunson and company going, "Hey, welcome home." And like I said, Malone is from the area, and he has an NBA title on his belt. I just find it interesting because people always complain that Tibbs wears these guys out. But I think but I did hear something interesting this week, and someone mentioned it. You take Steph Curry out of the equation, and Steph Curry, is just on a planet on his own, but also because as a shooter, he's spreading everything out. But when you're led by a little guy, tell me the last guy who leads you who's like 6'2", 6 and under, and you win the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
It's hard to find those. And that's what you're trying to do here. And
Wayne Wade, I guess he's not really 6'2", 6'3". He played bigger than the size.
6'4", but yeah.
Maybe something like that. But yeah, it's hard. There's not many.
It's hard, but that's what you're leaning on. And it's an imperfect roster. Look, all rosters are imperfect except maybe Oklahoma City because of all that depth. But you've got Karl Anthony Towns, who does these crazy things offensively that are great. His defense isn't great. Mitchell Robinson, great defensive player, but you can't leave him on there in the end because he can't shoot. He makes Shaq look like a good free throw shooter.
Right.
So it's like, okay, what do you do? I do think they had balanced offense. Brunson was used to taking over, but having a little guy lead you, it's kind of tough.
It's tough.
So that's how
their defense just wasn't good enough. They couldn't stop Indiana. They really didn't have that much trouble scoring against Indiana. They just couldn't stop them. And like you said, Karl Anthony Towns with his drop coverage, I mean, Halliburton ate that up. Brunson, they were picking on Brunson most of the time. And like you said, Brunson is small. He tries. He takes charges, right? He puts his body out there.
Right.
It's not like he's not trying, but he's limited. He's small, a small player. So, and obviously Karl Anthony Towns and Brunson are out there for all the big moments because they're the two best players on the team. And when their other team is able to pick on those two guys, like you said, that's where the flaw is in the roster. So we'll see what the Knicks do. They're still a very good team. They made the conference finals. I don't want people to think that we're saying, oh, they're just not good enough. I mean, they're if they make one more addition, or maybe they swap out one of their core players for somebody else that maybe is a better fit, maybe they make a jump. Like we saw with Indiana. Look, Indiana lost in the conference finals last year. They're in the NBA finals this year. So going back to the theme of this episode, there is no clear-cut favorite in the East right now. Kind of wide open.
It's funny you should mention this. This is going to be our smoothest segue in the history of this podcast. Well, with the two of us doing it. Looking at the Knicks, right? They need a little change. They need a little change of scenery. They need somebody there. It reminds me of the Florida Panthers.
Good, I like it.
Before they signed Kachuk, because they had Huberdeau, they had this high-scoring team, and they were just missing something. They were missing that kind of character and that kind of mindset to switch them. So I think maybe they should hire, Bill Zito from the Panthers, but they're not going to do that. But my point is, I'm looking at the Panthers who are in the Stanley Cup final for the third year in a row. Do we see does this remind you of the last time we had this successful run, which was the Heat with the Big Three era? Or what can the Heat learn from the Panthers that they should take? What can they do?
It's hard not to think about the Heat's run, right? Because that's the last time we've seen this in South Florida, where a team this dominant kind of has been this good for this sustained amount of time. It is crazy to think that the Panthers not only have to win this Stanley Cup, but also have to make it back next year to the Stanley Cup just to match what the Heat did during the Big Three. That's kind of insane, right? I mean, I think sometimes we look back at the Big Three and we're like, oh, they just didn't do enough. I mean, they made 4 NBA Finals and won 2 of them. So it is really impressive what the Heat did. But I think it's harder, and correct me if I'm wrong, JD, because I'm not an avid hockey fan, but I do watch it casually. I think it's harder to do this in hockey. Like, harder to do what the Panthers are doing in hockey than it is maybe what the Heat did in the NBA, where usually in the NBA, the best team is going to make it to the finals and win the championship, or at least be in the finals. Hockey in the playoffs are kind of, I mean, it can be a hot goaltender. It could be an injury. It's such a physical game. It's kind of random sometimes. There aren't many teams that have made it three straight Stanley Cups. There's probably more NBA teams that have done it, made to consecutive NBA finals than hockey teams. So in that regard, I would say it's more impressive what the Panthers are doing. And the fact that, like you said, they had a really good team before. They made that really risky move to trade one of their best players for Kachuk. Obviously, one of the best trades in South Florida history. They make the coaching change, which people are like, why would you do that? It didn't look good at first. And that first regular season under Paul Maurice wasn't great, and playing a more kind of a defensive style, the exact style that's won them, last year's championship and kind of led them on this run. So those changes even make this even more impressive because those were risky. Those weren't, I don't want to say like they weren't obvious moves. And Bill Zito made them, and they obviously the perfect moves. So credit to the Panthers. It obviously brings back memories of the Heat, but I just think it's even more impressive what the Panthers are doing because hockey, it's really hard to do in that sport.
And and Paul Maurice, I mean, he just dedicated a playoff style. And I look at it, we were just saying, this pace style that Indiana runs, usually doesn't work. They made it work, but it's an exception to the rule. Paul Maurice put in a style that was like, this is all for defense. Well, not all for defense. This is how they play in the playoffs. This is how we have to be successful. So many teams make the playoffs. I don't care what our regular season record is. We're building toward that. And it worked for them. And look, the one thing I do see that's kind of in common is the fact that the playoff runs, when you do these playoff runs year after year after year, and I'm sure you remember it from the Heat, by the time they got to that third and fourth one, and you have played like 300 games in 3 years,
difficult.
You get kind of worn out. And it seems like it takes a little bit more out of you and a little bit more. I will say this, in my opinion, for the Panthers, they keep finding the right guys who are hungry, who haven't won anything, to give them that extra jolt to push toward it. The Heat did it as well, but let's be honest, the big three so dominated all the airspace that sometimes you kind of feel, oh, Mike Wheeler won one. Oh, that's great. But these guys, it's like legit names like Brad Marchand, Seth Jones, the son of the great Dallas Maverick, Popeye Jones.
Yeah.
I just always found that hilarious. I was like, Popeye Jones' son plays hockey. Yes, he does, and he's pretty good at it. Yeah. But these kinds of things, it's those kind of moves. Those are the moves the front office can do. Like, not everyone in the front office is great at analyzing the players so much, but getting the right fits, listening to the entire team, listening to your coaches, and finding the right people who give you that extra oomph. I think that's very commendable for what the Panthers do.
Yeah, that brings back memories of the Heat too, right? Because you look at that run over the course of that 4-year run. Mm-hmm. First year was a Carlos Arroyo, then Mike Bibby and Zydrunas Ilgauskas. As the years went on, you got Shane Battier, you got Ray Allen, you got Birdman, right? Who all three of them played big roles in those championships. So it kind of reminds me of what the Panthers, like, as the run has gone on, they keep adding these pieces that like add a new jolt, right, to what they're doing. Maybe add something different, or maybe even make them better, right? A lot of people would argue that this Panthers team is better than last year's just because of the Marchand addition and Seth Jones. I think it is interesting that that's a similarity, I think, too, where over the course of the run, they've kind of added these important pieces that it's like the same core, but different around the edges,
Right. So if you are Spo, you're Pat Riley, you're Andy Ellisberg, do you see anything from how the Panthers constructed this roster that you can take and use? And I always say this because Spo, to his credit, he doesn't just learn from people in his basketball profession. Yeah. He looks for successful coaches everywhere to try and squeeze every dropout. So I'm saying if you're in the Heat front office and you have this team that's made it to the finals 3 years in a row, what can you squeeze out of them that you think will help your team?
Yeah, it's tough because roster construction, I think, in hockey is a lot different than NBA. In NBA, you could have, like you said, the big three, right? And that's enough to win a lot of games, right? And hockey, I think depth is more important. But I guess if anything, just don't be afraid. Like, don't be so conservative, right? I mean, we talked about the Panthers made 2 really risky moves, trading a fan favorite, one of the best players at that point in franchise history, in Huberdeau, for Kachuk, who was obviously he's very good, but they were one of the best. They were, I think, they're the best record in the NHL the year before.
The year before, yeah, they had the best record. They had the President's Trophy, which is
and then and I know they didn't equate the playoff success, but still, then to trade one of your best players who's been here for a while for another. A lot of teams don't do that, right? I'm not saying that he should trade Bam for whoever, but just don't make a move, make a big move, right? Like take a bet, like make a gamble. Maybe it'll pay off. So I guess that, but like I said, roster construction is so different in NHL that it's hard to really learn too much. But I would just say this: the gambles that the Panthers made that paid off. If they don't make those gambles and they're like, we were one of the best teams in the NHL next year, let's run it back. They're not in this position most likely. So that's something that he could take from kind of what the Panthers have done.
I will say one thing that they have done. They drafted early, and he doesn't get to do that, so we understand. Mm-hmm. They drafted early. Those that they hit on, they targeted, they identified, and they extended those guys. So, yes, the construction, the salary cap's different, but they did identify. Look, there were guys they let go. Huberdeau was a top 5 pick, and they said, okay, his style isn't what's going to get us to win in the playoffs. But they had 3 or 4 other guys that they did, and like Ekblad, and we won't go into it because this is more a basketball podcast. Yeah. But the point is, they said, these are our young guys that we're going to roll with. These are guys we really think are going to help us win. Those who we don't think quite fit the style we want to achieve, we'll trade for them. So as they're going through, and we look at the Heat, and they have younger guys, another fine segue, by the way. They have these younger guys who are good and talented. As they try and figure out what's going to make them successful, they have to make that fit properly. So we'll see how they do this offseason. Look, the Heat front office, these guys are not dumb by any stretch of the imagination. They're going to overturn everything they can. They have found gems where no one else has found gems. They have turned over and they've gone whale hunting and found whales. It's harder to do, but it's not impossible. But I look forward to this NBA Finals. This is more a purist. This is a basketball fans NBA Finals.
Yeah,
we're not going to
fun basketball matchup. Yeah.
People aren't going, hey, SGA versus Tyrese Halliburton. This is what we're coming to see, but they're going to see some good basketball. And this is where you make your name. In 2 or 3 years, we may look back and go, wow, that was the beginning of. But for right now, they're going to, it's going to be a wait and see. But it should be fun.
Can I say one thing, JD, before we wrap up? I think longtime Heat Check listeners will be happy about our Panthers conversation. David Wilson and I, former Miami Herald sports reporter David Wilson, we used to do a Panthers minute during these playoff runs. During the Heat podcast, since we don't have a Panthers podcast, we would he loved hockey, so we would talk about the Panthers. So kind of the return of the Panthers minute here. So
we gave about 5. So
Panthers 5 minutes. Yeah,
we're just about evened out. Yes.
Yeah. There you go. We'll do it again next episode, depending on what the Panthers do here.
And coming on next episode, we probably need to start turning our attention to the draft. The draft is about 2 weeks away. Yeah. And with this draft, it's going to be fun anyway, just because it's very top heavy. Because of the teams picking where they're picking, you can have trades. You can probably expect trades just to see, you have established teams that have top 5 picks. So do they wait on young people or do they try and trade it for an established star and turn everything over? So, and I'm sure the Heat is always hunting to see how they can take advantage of the market. So we'll take a look at that next week. We'll talk about the NBA Finals. We'll have fun. Just because the NBA is near the end of its playoff season doesn't mean it's time for us to go to sleep.
Oh, it's all just beginning, JD. It's all just beginning, actually, for us.
And then you'll have free agency, the summer league, and next thing you know, it'll be training camp. So stay locked in with us. We will be here. Anthony will be all over the place. And once again, for Heat Check, I'm John Devine. This is Anthony Chang. Until next time, keep your heads up.